The fluorescent light above Bay 7 had been flickering for 11 days. Daniel Carter had submitted the maintenance request himself, twice, using the same internal ticketing system he'd been trained on during his first week. The requests were marked pending. The light kept flickering. He stopped looking up at it. He worked in silence the way he did most things completely, without asking for acknowledgement. Tonight, it was a conveyor belt housing on the east loading dock, a fractured bracket that would have eventually seized the entire eastern sorting line. He'd caught it during his walkthrough, the way he always caught things, not because anyone asked him to do a walkthrough, but because he couldn't help it. His brain was wired that way. It found the thing that was slightly wrong and wouldn't let go until he fixed it. He was on his back under the housing, flashlight in his teeth, when he heard Garrett's voice behind him. "Carter, you're supposed to be on forklift calibration tonight, not playing mechanic on something nobody asked you to touch." Daniel slid out from under the housing. He was 34 years old, lean in the way of someone who forgot to eat on bad days, with hands that were permanently faintly calloused. He sat up and pulled the flashlight from his mouth. The bracket was cracked. "If it fails during the morning run, it takes down the whole east. Did I ask you to inspect the east dock? No. Then write it up. Put it in a ticket. I have 2 tickets on this already. They've been pending since Carter." Garrett Pullman was the kind of man who smiled when he interrupted people, as if the interruption were a gift he was giving. He was 41, wore collared shirts that didn't quite fit him across the shoulders, and had held the title of operations supervisor for 6 years. He didn't know what a fractured bracket looked like. He'd never needed to. "If I wanted your opinion on how this facility should run, I'd ask for it. Do the forklift calibration." Bay 3. Daniel looked at him for a moment. Then he picked up his tools. He did the forklift calibration. Bay 3. He also finished repairing the bracket housing after Garrett had gone back to his office, using the last 40 minutes of his shift. The parking lot of Meridian Logistics Solutions was mostly empty by the time Daniel clocked out. 11:47 p.m. He sat in his car for a minute before starting it, a 2009 Honda Civic that ran well because he maintained it himself. He leaned his head back and closed his eyes. He thought about Lily. She'd been asleep when the babysitter had texted him a photo at 8:30, curled up in the blue blanket with the small yellow stars. Her dark hair across the pillow, one hand tucked under her cheek the way she always slept. 6 years old. She called it her thinking pose, sleeping like that, and she claimed her best ideas came from it. He believed her. He started the car. The drive home was 23 minutes on a good night. He took the highway because surface streets added 7 minutes, and every minute mattered when you had a sitter who charged by the half hour past midnight. He drove with the radio off. He preferred the quiet. He'd learned to like it in the years after Claire died, not because it was comfortable, but because eventually you ran out of ways to fill it. Claire had been gone for 4 years now. Pancreatic cancer. Fast and without mercy. Lily had been too. She didn't remember her mother, not really, though she asked about her in the careful, precise way that 6-year-olds ask about things they sense are important. What did Mama smell like? Was her hair straight or curly? Did she like dogs? Daniel answered every question. He had a photo of Claire on the refrigerator, low enough that Lily could see it, and beside it, one of the 3 of them from a trip to the coast. Lily, not yet 1-year-old, squinting in the sun. He had been a mechanical engineer before, not a maintenance technician. He'd designed load-bearing systems for a mid-sized infrastructure firm, done the kind of work that required 3 monitors and a team of 7. But after Claire died, there was no team, no nights away for site visits, no weekends lost to calculations. There was only Lily. And so he'd step down not sideways, but straight down into whatever would let him be home by midnight. Meridian had taken him. The pay was approximately half of what he'd made before. He hadn't told anyone at Meridian he had a mechanical engineering degree. It didn't seem like information they would know what to do with. He pulled into the apartment complex at 12:09 a.m. He paid the sitter, Nora, a college student from down the hall who was kind to Lily in the simple, unguarded way young people could be kind. He checked on Lily, still the thinking pose, still the yellow-starred blanket, and stood in her doorway for longer than he needed to. He went to bed. He didn't sleep much. He never did. It started raining at 9:40 the following evening. Not a light rain. The kind that comes fast and sideways. The kind that makes the highway look like the bottom of a river. Daniel's wipers were at full speed, and it still wasn't enough. He had Lily in the back seat. She'd come with him tonight. Unavoidable. Because Nora had an exam, and the backup sitter hadn't answered, and she was asleep before they'd even hit the on-ramp, which was how Lily handled things she'd decided were boring. She was practical that way. He'd put her car seat blanket over her. He drove carefully. He always drove carefully. He kept 3 car lengths of distance and watched his speed and stayed in the right lane where he could. He was in the middle lane when he saw the lights. First, the brake lights. Too bright, too sudden, a scatter of red in the rain and dark. Then something larger, a silver sedan, maybe a late-model Mercedes, moving wrong, too fast for the conditions. The rear end stepping out in the wet. He watched it happen in the strange, slow-motion way. Emergencies always seem to arrive. The car's trajectory going sideways. Then the guardrail, the sound reaching him a half-second later. A long shriek of metal, then a crunch that seemed to come from inside his own chest. The car flipped. It happened once, lazily, almost gracefully, and came to rest on its roof in the right lane 20 meters ahead of him. Steam rose from the engine compartment, and then, very quickly, something else rose from beneath it, not steam. Orange. He was already braking. He pulled onto the shoulder, hazards on, and sat for exactly 3 seconds. 3 seconds was enough time to look at the other cars, 4 or 5 of them, also stopped. No one moving toward the wreck. Enough time to see that the fire was at the engine block and spreading. Enough time to look in his rear-view mirror at Lily, still asleep. Enough time to make the decision. He left the car running. The heat was on. The doors were locked from the inside. He unbuckled his seatbelt, leaned back, and very gently tightened the blanket around his daughter without waking her. He did not allow himself to hesitate after that, because he knew hesitation, once invited, expanded to fill all available space. He got out into the rain. The heat hit him before he reached the car, a wall of it, even in the rain, pushing back against him with a physicality he hadn't expected. The fire was eating the front third of the vehicle now. Working toward the passenger compartment, he could see someone inside, slumped against what had been the ceiling, hair hanging down, one arm visible. Not moving. He assessed in seconds. The car was upside down. The driver's side window was shattered. The door frame had buckled, but not completely, which meant the door itself might still open, or it might not. The seatbelt would be under tension, locking with the inversion. He'd need something to cut it. He had a multi-tool on his keyring. He'd carried one since he was 19. He circled the car fast, testing the heat with his forearm. He'd learned that from somewhere, engineering fieldwork or something older, some instinct he didn't bother analyzing. The passenger side was closer to the fire. Driver's side was viable. He dropped to his knees in the rain and broken glass, and reached through the window. The woman inside was unconscious. Her face was turned away from him. She was wearing a blazer. Charcoal gray, expensive. Her seatbelt had her suspended at a wrong angle, shoulder cutting into her throat. He reached up and worked his multi-tool open, one-handed. It took 4 seconds to cut the belt. She dropped, and he caught most of her weight. The rain soaking through his shirt. He registered, distantly, that the fire was louder now, a crackling that had deepened into something with more substance. He didn't look at it. He braced his feet against the door frame and pulled. She was not small. He could tell she was probably around 5 to 8, solid, not unconscious in the way of someone sleeping, but in the absent way of someone who'd taken a blow to the head. He pulled steadily, not frantically, moving her the way you moved, something valuable you didn't want to drop. Her blazer caught on the door frame. He freed it. Her shoulder caught. He repositioned. He got her out into the rain. He dragged her to the grass verge, 30 feet from the car. He checked her airway clear and her pulse present, strong enough. He tilted her head back the way he'd been taught at a first aid class 12 years ago, held it for 3 seconds to confirm she was breathing on her own. She grabbed his wrist. He looked down. Her eyes weren't open. But her hand had his wrist, and it was holding on with surprising force, the grip of someone not entirely absent after all. "You're safe," he said quietly. "You're outside the car. You're on the grass. Don't move." Her grip loosened, not completely. He stayed where he was, kneeling in the rain beside her, until he heard sirens. He waited until he could see the first set of headlights, fire truck, probably, or police, coming from the south. Then he stood up. He looked at the woman one more time. She was breathing steadily. Her color was good. He didn't know her name. He didn't need to. He walked back to his car, got in, and sat for a moment in the warmth, rain drumming on the roof. In the back seat, Lily slept on in the thinking pose. He put the car in drive and pulled slowly back onto the shoulder, then found the gap to merge onto the highway. He was home by 12:30. He hung his soaking shirt over the shower rod. He sat on the edge of the tub for a minute. He went to bed. The next morning, Lily woke him at 6:15 by climbing on his chest, which was how she woke him when she was in a good mood. She had Claire's eyes wide set, darker than expected, and she used them to maximum effect at all times, including now, staring down at him from a distance of approximately 4 inches. "Bah," she said, because she'd picked it up somewhere and it had stuck. "Are you going to make eggs today, or cereal? What day is it?" "Thursday." "Eggs," he said. She climbed off him and went to find her shoes. He lay still for another 30 seconds. Remembering the rain, the heat, he noted these things the way he noted most things. Catalogued, filed, not dwelt upon. He made eggs. He was 14 minutes late to work. It was the sitter situation. Nora's exam ended early, and she'd come at 7:30, but Daniel had still had to drop Lily at school, which ran until 3, and the school was in the opposite direction from Meridian. He pulled into the parking lot at 8:14. He'd called ahead. Lorraine in dispatch had said fine. She'd note it. What Lorraine had apparently not said was that Garrett Pullman had been watching the time clock. He was barely through the door when Garrett materialized at the end of the corridor. Not urgently, Garrett never moved urgently, but with the kind of deliberate slowness that said, "I have been waiting for this." "Conference room B," Garrett said. I called ahead. "Conference room B, Carter." The conference room had a rectangular table and 6 chairs, and a whiteboard on which someone had written Q3 efficiency targets in red marker. Daniel sat down. Garrett sat across from him. Beside Garrett was a woman Daniel didn't recognize, mid-40s, HR lanyard. Expression of practice neutrality. "You were late," Garrett said. 14 minutes. I called dispatch. This is your 3rd documented late arrival this quarter. Daniel considered this. The first one was in January when the pipes froze. "I'm not interested in the explanations, Carter. What I'm interested in is accountability. And what I see is a pattern." Garrett folded his hands on the table. He was visibly enjoying himself in the way people enjoy themselves when they have decided the outcome in advance. "Additionally, last night, you performed unauthorized maintenance on the East Dock conveyor housing. The bracket was cracked. It would have unauthorized. You were assigned to Bay 3 forklift calibration. I completed the forklift calibration. After completing unauthorized work that took time away from, I did it on my own time." After clockout, Garrett paused. The HR woman didn't write anything. She watched. "The pattern of disregarding direct instructions," Garrett said. "Combined with the attendance issues, I was 14 minutes late because I think we're past explanations." Garrett slid a single sheet of paper across the table. "Meridian is terminating your employment, effective immediately. You'll receive 2 weeks severance as outlined in your contract. Please return your access card and any company property before you leave." Daniel looked at the paper. He looked at Garrett. He looked at the HR woman, who looked back at him with the flat, careful gaze of someone performing a function. He thought, briefly, about saying what he wanted to say, about the bracket, the pending tickets, the 11 days of flickering fluorescent light, the 3 years he'd spent catching the things everyone else missed. He thought about the time he'd recalibrated the entire East Dock sensor array over a single weekend, because the vendor quote was $80,000, and he'd done it for parts and his own time. He thought about whether any of that was in a file somewhere with his name on it. He didn't think it was. He didn't say what he wanted to say. He picked up the paper. He slid his access card across the table in its place. He stood up and walked out of conference room B, and down the corridor and through the parking lot, and got into his car. He sat there. His phone buzzed. A text from Lily's school, a photo from her class's morning project, Lily holding up a drawing of a house with a large orange sun above it and 2 figures out front. She'd labeled them in her careful, uneven, first-grade print, me and DA. He looked at the photo for a long time. He started the car. Victoria Hale had been told she was lucky approximately 40 times in the past 18 hours, and she was beginning to find it slightly irritating. She knew she was lucky. She'd seen the footage. The ER attending had explained in careful, measured terms what would have happened if the fire had reached the passenger compartment. She understood the math of her survival completely. That wasn't what was irritating her. What was irritating her was that she didn't know who had pulled her out. She was 43 years old. She had spent the past 19 years building Hale Capital Group from a single-room investment advisory into a firm that managed just under $4 billion in assets and held controlling interests in 11 companies across 3 sectors. She was not accustomed to not knowing things. She ran toward information the way other people ran toward cover. She was sitting up in the hospital bedroom 14, private wing. Her assistant Marcus had handled it when Detective Pearson came in with the tablet. "We pulled footage from 3 cameras," he said. "The accident itself, the shoulder, and the overpass camera 200 meters back." "Show me." The footage was grainy, in the way highway cameras were always grainy, rain-blurred and orange-lit by sodium vapor lamps. But it was clear enough. She watched her car do the thing she'd been told it had done, and tried to feel something clinical about it. Then she watched a figure get out of a vehicle on the shoulder and walk toward the wreck. He moved with the unhurried efficiency of someone who had decided and was now simply executing. No running, no hesitation. She watched him drop to his knees beside her car. She watched him work. "He's there for approximately 90 seconds, Pearson said. Extracts the victim and moves her to the grass verge. Stays with her until the first responders are visible, then returns to his vehicle and leaves before anyone has a chance to speak with him." "He left," Victoria said, "before anyone could get his name, but he had a car, a 2009 Honda Civic." "Yes." "Partial plate were working on a full match. There was also a child in the vehicle. A rear-facing car seat was visible on one of the earlier frames. He had a child in the car." Victoria was quiet for a moment. "He had a child in the car," she repeated, "and he still got out." "Yes." She looked at the frozen frame on the tablet. The figure walking away in the rain. Unhurried. Back to his car. Back to his child. Done with what needed doing. "Find him," she said. It took Marcus 17 hours. The plate match came through first, then registration, then a name, Daniel Andrew Carter, age 34, address on Clearfield Avenue, employed by Meridian Logistics Solutions. Employed, past tense, as it turned out. Marcus brought her the full file in the morning, laid it on her hospital tray with the sort of brisk discretion she paid him for. She read through it while she ate bad hospital toast and drank surprisingly decent coffee someone had brought from outside. Daniel Carter. Mechanical engineering degree from State, graduated with honors. 4 years at Hartley Infrastructure Group, by all accounts a strong performer, specialist in load-bearing system design. Then a gap cross-referenced with public records. She found the death certificate. Claire Elaine Carter, née Morrison, pancreatic cancer. Survived by husband Daniel and daughter Lily, age 2. After that, Meridian. 3 years of maintenance technician work. Excellent internal reviews from dispatch and fellow technicians. 1 documented conflict with a supervisor named Garrett Pullman, marked resolved in the HR file, which Victoria took to mean Pullman won. And then, yesterday morning, termination. She read the termination record twice. Then she set it down. She looked out the window of room 14, at the parking structure and the strip of gray sky above it. She picked up her phone and called her acquisitions team. Victoria had a rule about decisions: sleep on the significant ones. She'd had the rule since she was 26 and had made a major acquisition call at 2 in the morning after 16 hours of due diligence, fueled by certainty and bad energy drink, and had been wrong in a way that cost real money and took 18 months to fully unwind. She slept on this one. Or tried to the hospital bed, was not designed for sleeping. And her shoulder, which had been badly bruised in the crash, ached in a way that made every position equally bad. But she lay in the dark and thought clearly, which was sometimes the same thing as sleeping. She was not a sentimental person. Her ex-husband Edward would have said she was the least sentimental person he'd ever met, and she thought that was mostly fair. And she thought Edward had said it meaning it as an insult when it was actually not. Sentiment made you slow. Clarity made you accurate. She was also not naive about what she was considering doing: acquiring a controlling interest in a mid-sized logistics company because the company had wrongly terminated the person who had saved her life. That was not, on its face, a business decision. That was something else. But she'd been thinking about Meridian Logistics Solutions before the crash. Not seriously, not with intent, but the company had crossed her desk 3 months ago as part of a sector analysis, and she'd noted that it was underperforming its regional peers by approximately 18%, while carrying debt levels that suggested the current leadership was either incapable of course correction or not trying. Either option interested her. So the business case was real. She wasn't manufacturing it. What the file didn't say, what Marcus's meticulous summary couldn't capture, was the thing she kept returning to in the dark of room 14. He had a child in the car. He'd put the child somewhere safe. He'd assessed the risk. He'd made a decision that anyone in his position would have had every reasonable right not to make. And then he'd simply done what needed to be done and walked away before anyone could thank him. Because apparently that was the kind of man he was. And the people who'd employed him for 3 years had looked at the same man and seen someone without a future. That gap between what she'd seen in the grainy footage and what Garrett Pullman had apparently seen interested her in a way she couldn't entirely explain and didn't entirely need to. She called her acquisitions team at 7 in the morning. The quarterly strategy meeting for Meridian Logistics Solutions was held on the 2nd floor of the company's main facility, in a conference room that had been renovated 18 months ago and still smelled faintly of new carpet. It had a long glass wall overlooking the operations floor below, which Garrett Pullman had lobbied for during the renovation because he liked seeing the facility from above. It made him feel appropriately elevated. There were 9 people around the table: COO, CFO, regional managers, department heads. Garrett was presenting the Q3 efficiency numbers, which were not impressive, but which he had formatted in a way that made them seem like a foundation rather than a ceiling. He used the word trajectory 11 times. He was on slide 7 when the door opened. The woman who walked in was not someone Garrett recognized, which was unusual because Garrett prided himself on knowing who mattered in the regional logistics space. She was tall, in a charcoal blazer that was the expensive kind of understated, with her arm in a partial brace that she wore with the air of someone who found it inconvenient rather than incapacitating. She had the particular quality of self-possession that doesn't announce itself, it just takes up exactly the space it occupies, and no more. Behind her was a man in a suit Garrett assessed as costing more than his monthly take-home, carrying a leather portfolio. And behind him, 2 more people. Quiet, attentive. "I'm sorry," Garrett said, with the smile he used when he was not sorry. "This is a closed meeting." The woman looked at him. Just looked. Then she walked to the far end of the table and sat down. "Mr. Pullman," she said, "please continue." The CFO, Brian Holloway, had gone a color that wasn't quite white, but was working toward it. He leaned toward Garrett and said something very quietly. Garrett heard the words "Hail Capital" and "controlling interest" and felt the floor of the meeting shift beneath him in a way that had nothing to do with the building. "I apologize," Garrett said, more carefully now. "I wasn't aware." "Of course not," Victoria said. "Carry on." He didn't carry on. No one did. The room had a quality it hadn't had 10 minutes ago. Something redistributed in the air, like pressure before a storm. Victoria opened the leather portfolio the suited man had placed in front of her. She looked at the papers inside for a moment. Then she looked up. "Before we continue with the meeting," she said, "I have a question." The question she asked was quiet. That was the thing Garrett Pullman would remember afterward. Not the content of it, but the tone. No performance. No drama. Just the same clarity you'd use to ask someone to pass the water. "Who terminated Daniel Carter yesterday?" Silence. Not the kind of silence that follows a confusing question. The kind that follows one that everyone understands immediately, and no one wants to step into first. Garrett's instinct was to look around the table, to find someone to triangulate with. But everyone was looking at the woman at the end of the table, and so he straightened in his chair and did the same. "That would be me," he said. "Standard disciplinary." "I'd like to show you something first," Victoria said. The man with the portfolio produced a tablet. He placed it flat on the table and slid it toward the center where everyone could see. Victoria stood and touched the screen, and the room's presentation display, still showing slide 7, Q3 trajectory, went dark, and then showed what the tablet showed. Highway camera footage, rain, a flipped car, a fire. "This is footage from the Route 9 interchange," Victoria said. "Taken the night before last, at approximately 10:50 p.m. She let them watch. No narration. Just the footage, the rain, the orange glow spreading under the upended Mercedes, and then the figure getting out of the car on the shoulder, walking toward it. Garrett recognized the Honda Civic from the lot. Not consciously, he'd never specifically noticed Daniel's car, but some part of him registered it. The footage ran 90 seconds. The figure worked on the door, extracted the person, moved to the grass, stayed, left when the lights were visible. Victoria stopped the footage. "That woman," she said, "is me." She let that sit for a moment. She was good at letting things sit. "The man who pulled me from that car was Daniel Carter. He had his 6-year-old daughter in the back seat of his vehicle. He secured her, assessed the situation, and entered a burning car to extract someone he had never met. He stayed until he confirmed I was breathing and that emergency services were arriving. Then he left without providing his name, without waiting for anyone to thank him." The room was very still. The following morning, Victoria continued, he was 14 minutes late to work. He was then terminated by Mr. Pullman for that tardiness and for performing what was characterized as unauthorized maintenance, which, according to your own equipment logs, prevented a failure in the e-stock conveyor system that would have cost this company approximately $47,000 in downtime and repairs. She looked at Garrett. Garrett had the sensation of being a very specific kind of wrong. The kind that doesn't have a good argument available to it. "I want to be precise about what I'm telling you," Victoria said. "I'm not telling you that you should have made an exception for Daniel Carter because he saved my life. I'm telling you that the decision to terminate him was wrong before any of this happened. The life-saving is additional context." She closed the portfolio. "The footage has been shared with local news. It will publish tomorrow. The story of what Daniel Carter did will be public by morning, and the story of what this company did to him 12 hours later will also be public." She paused. "I made sure of that." Garrett opened his mouth. "Mr. Pullman," the CFO said quietly, from 2 seats away, "I don't think this is the moment." Garrett closed his mouth. "Effective today," Victoria said, "I'll be assuming an active role in operational oversight at this company. As majority shareholder, that's within my rights. I'll be making some changes." She looked at the room at each face in turn, unhurried. "Some of those changes will be personnel. We'll have individual conversations about that this week." She picked up her portfolio. "The meeting is concluded," she said. It took Marcus 2 hours to find Daniel's current address, because Daniel wasn't listed in any directory that looked for people who wanted to be found. He was in the older records from his engineering firm, an address on Clearfield Avenue. and Marcus confirmed it was current by cross-referencing the school enrollment for Lily Carter, age 6, at Clearfield Elementary, 4 blocks from the apartment. Victoria drove herself. Her shoulder ached. She drove anyway. The building on Clearfield was a 3-story walk-up, clean, not new, with a community garden in the small front yard that someone was clearly taking care of. She found apartment 2C and knocked. The door was opened by a 6-year-old. Lily Carter was approximately 4 feet tall, wearing a shirt with a dinosaur on it, and regarding Victoria with the specific, assessing gaze of a child who has decided adults are interesting and mostly unpredictable. "Hi," Lily said. "Hi," Victoria said. "Are you a friend of my dad's?" "Not yet." Lily considered this with apparent seriousness. "He's in the kitchen. He's making sad face about his phone." Lily. Daniel appeared behind her in the hallway. He was wearing jeans and a gray shirt, no shoes, holding a coffee mug. He looked at Victoria and went very still in the way of someone who has recognized something unexpected but is too controlled to show much of it. Then he looked at her arm. "You were in the car," he said. "I was in the car," she said. A pause. He looked at Lily, who had not moved, and was clearly not going to move without direct instruction. "Lily, living room please." "But, please." Lily withdrew. With the dignity of someone staging a tactical retreat, Daniel stepped back from the door. Victoria took this as an invitation and stepped inside. The apartment was small and precise. She'd expected the precision from everything she'd read about him, the engineering background, the maintenance work. Things were in their places. There was a drawing on the refrigerator, a house with a sun, 2 figures labeled M.E. and D.A. There was a bookshelf with engineering texts on the top shelf and picture books on the bottom. There was a blanket on the couch with small yellow stars. He didn't offer her coffee. She didn't expect him to. He stood at the kitchen counter, and she stood at the edge of the living room, and they looked at each other across the small space. "How did you find me?" he asked. "I have good staff. What do you want?" "To talk. About a job." Something moved through his face, not warmth exactly, but the guarded, evaluating quality of a man who had learned to check what things were before he reached for them. "I saw you on the news this morning," he said. "Footage from the highway." "Yes. That's mine to think about." "It is. I understand that. I didn't do it so anyone would know." "I know. I didn't want." He stopped. He set the mug down on the counter. He turned to look out the window over the sink. "My daughter was in the car," he said, quietly. "I know. I almost didn't get out." That surprised her. She waited. "I sat there for 3 seconds," he said, running the numbers. What if the car exploded while I was at the wreck? What if Lily woke up and I wasn't there? What if I couldn't get you out and lost the 3 seconds I could have used to drive away? He looked at the window, not at her. "And then I thought, what if I do nothing and you die? And my daughter grows up knowing her father did the calculation and drove away." "A silence." "So I got out," he said. Victoria had been in negotiating rooms for 2 decades. She had learned not to fill silence with words when words were the wrong thing. She waited. Daniel turned from the window. "What kind of job?" he said. The conversation lasted an hour and 15 minutes. Lily emerged 3 times, once for water. Once to show Victoria a drawing of what she described as a dragon but also kind of a dog. And once simply to sit on the couch within earshot, having assessed that the adults were doing something sufficiently interesting. Victoria offered him a position. Director of Operations. Technical Infrastructure. It was not a maintenance job. It was, in fact, substantially closer to what he'd been doing at Hartley Infrastructure. With a team, real scope, and a salary that was closer to double his meridian wage. He'd have flexibility over his schedule core hours, yes. But the kind of position where you delivered results. Not attendance. He said no. Not immediately. He sat with it for a moment, but clearly. "I appreciate what you're trying to do," he said. "But I don't want to be the person you saved, because you felt like you owed something. That's not what this is." "What is it then?" "It's a business decision. I'm restructuring a company." I need someone who can run technical operations and won't tolerate systems that fail because no one was paying attention. You spent 3 years at Meridian paying attention to things no one asked you to pay attention to. That's the profile I'm looking for. You could find that anywhere. I could find competence anywhere. I can't find that specific combination of competence and the decision to get out of the car. He looked at her. The getting out of the car, she said, is not something I'm trying to reward. It's not currency. It's data about who you are. And who you are is what I'm hiring. Lily, from the couch, said, without looking up from her drawing, she makes good points, duh. Daniel looked at his daughter. Something on his face shifted the thing guarded against itself, yielding, just slightly. I'd need the schedule in writing, he said. Done. And I'd need to bring Lily in sometimes. School's out, snow days. She's sick. I can work with a child in the building, but not if that's going to be a problem. Victoria looked at Lily, who had looked up from her drawing and was now watching with the frank, bright attention of someone who knew herself to be under discussion. She can have a desk, Victoria said. Lily went back to her drawing. I want a red one, she said. The day Daniel Carter walked into Hale Capital's regional office for the first time, it was a Thursday in October, 6 weeks after the night on the highway. The office was on the 14th floor of a building in the financial district, not new, but well-maintained. The kind of place where things worked because someone kept them working. He noticed this. He noticed the elevator mechanism when they rode up in it, the smooth way the doors sealed, the calibration that kept the car exactly flush with the floor. Lily had insisted on wearing her best outfit, which was a blue dress with white stripes and her red sneakers. She had her backpack, in which she'd packed 3 colored pencils, a chapter book about horses, her yellow starred blanket folded into a tight square, and a granola bar for emergencies. Victoria met them in the lobby herself. She shook Daniel's hand. Then she looked at Lily. I believe I owe you a desk, she said. Lily looked at her with the evaluating gaze. Then she looked at Daniel, then back at Victoria. Red, Lily said. Red, Victoria confirmed. The desk was real. It was not a large desk. It sat in the corner of the operations office, just inside the glass partition, in the sightline of Daniel's larger desk, but out of the main traffic flow. It was painted a precise fire engine red. And on the morning it arrived, Lily had walked around it twice, pressed on the surface with both hands, and pronounced it structurally sound, which was something she'd heard Daniel say about things he approved of. She'd put her pencils on it in a row. She'd set her granola bar in the top drawer. She'd unfolded the yellow starred blanket and put it on the chair. Then she'd sat down and opened her horse book and gotten to work. Daniel spent the first week making lists. He was good at lists, not the kind that were performative, meant to be seen in meetings, but the working kind, dense and specific, the kind that mapped what existed against what should exist and identified the distance between them. The distance at Meridian's operations, which he was now overseeing under the restructuring, was substantial. He documented it without judgment. Systems that had been deferred past reasonable maintenance windows. Training protocols that existed on paper and nowhere else. An equipment logging system that was technically functional, but designed in a way that nobody actually used it because using it correctly took twice as long as not using it. He called his first team meeting in the second week. There were 7 people in the room. Some of them had been at Meridian for years. Some of them had reported, at one point, to Garrett Pullman. Some of them had been in the room on the morning Daniel was terminated, had heard the whole thing, and were now sitting across the table from him with the expression of people uncertain whether to apologize or pretend. He didn't make them do either. I'm going to tell you how I work, he said, at the start of the meeting. And then I'm going to ask you to tell me how you work. And that's how we'll figure out where the problems are. He paused. There are no trick questions in this room. If something isn't working, I want to know. If I do something that doesn't make sense to you, tell me. If there's a bracket about to fail on the East Dock, I want the ticket filed, and I want someone to look at it that day, not in 11 days. He stopped. He hadn't meant to say the 11 days part, but he left it there. Any questions? One of the technicians, a tall man named Roy, who had worked loading dock maintenance for 9 years, and had the careful, observant quality of someone who had learned to stay below the blast radius of bad management, raised his hand. "Are you going to be here?" Roy asked. "Like, actually here? Or is this the thing where management comes in for a week, and then we don't see them until the quarterly?" "I'll be here," Daniel said. Roy looked at him for a moment, measuring. Then he nodded, slowly, the nod of a man deciding to believe something provisionally. "Okay," Roy said. "Here's what's actually broken." He took lunch at his desk most days, which meant he took lunch near Lily's red desk, which meant lunch was rarely quiet. Lily had opinions about everything she was reading, everything she'd drawn that morning, everything she'd observed from her corner of the operations office. She had befriended 2 of the administrative staff and a junior analyst named Petra, who brought her good pens and occasionally joined her for what Lily called important drawing sessions. Petra had started keeping a sketchbook on her desk. On a Friday afternoon in November, Daniel was working through a supplier contract review when Lily appeared beside his desk with something on her face. "What?" he said. "I have a question," she said. "About feelings." "Okay. When something is hard for a long time, and then it gets better," she said, with the precision of someone who has been turning a thought over for a while. "Do you have to be sad about the hard part? Or can you just be happy about the better part?" He considered the question seriously, because she had asked it seriously. "You can be both at the same time," he said. "That's actually pretty normal." She thought about this. "I think I'm mostly happy," she said. "But I remember the hard part." "So do I," he said. She looked at him for a moment longer. Then she went back to her desk. He sat still for a moment. Outside the glass partition, the operations floor moved with its particular rhythm, the sounds of a facility that was working, imperfect but working, getting better in the incremental way that things got better when someone was paying attention. He went back to the contract review. Victoria found him in the parking structure at the end of that same Friday, waiting for the elevator with Lily asleep against his shoulder, her backpack on his other arm, the yellow-starred blanket trailing from her hand. Victoria had her own car, her own driver, a schedule that extended the working week well past 6 p.m. on most days. She was on her phone when she came around the corner and nearly stopped short when she saw them. She put her phone in her pocket. They rode the elevator down together, quiet, Lily's breath the only sound. In the lobby, Victoria held the door. The driver was waiting at the curb. "Is she always like that?" Victoria asked. "Just out. She decides when things are done," Daniel said, "and then she's done. She doesn't negotiate with sleep. A pause. She's going to be formidable," Victoria said. "She already is." The car was at the curb. He adjusted Lily against his shoulder. Found his keys. He looked at Victoria. "Thank you," he said. Not elaborating. Not qualifying. She looked back at him. For what, specifically? For seeing it differently. She understood what he meant. She didn't say, "of course," or "it was nothing," because neither of those was true, and they were both people who didn't say things that weren't true. "Thank you," she said, "for getting out of the car." He nodded once. He put Lily in the back seat, the thinking pose, the yellow stars. He buckled her in with the careful precision he brought to everything that mattered to him. He got in the front. He drove home in the quiet, and it was a different kind of quiet than the quiet he'd been living in for 4 years, not the quiet of absence, but of something settling, something that had been held at a distance for a long time, finally allowed to be close. Lily slept on. The news story ran the following morning. Victoria had timed it carefully not to protect herself, but to let the facts lead, rather than the sentiment, the footage, the timeline, the termination record, the restructuring. It was covered by the regional paper first, then picked up widely. Comments notwithstanding, she'd been explicit with her communications team that she wasn't interested in what people were saying about it online. The factual record was clear. A man had done a significant thing. A company had treated him badly. The company was being corrected. That was all. In the months that followed, Daniel did not become someone different. That was the thing Victoria came to appreciate most clearly about him. In the quiet way she came to appreciate things that proved true over time. He did not acquire a new opinion of himself commensurate with the new opinion others had of him. He remained, essentially, the same person who had submitted 2 maintenance tickets about a flickering light and then, when the tickets went unaddressed, had fixed the light himself without comment. He fixed things. He found what was broken and made it work. He made systems that people could actually use, and he built a team that trusted him the way Roy had decided to trust him on that first day provisionally at first. And then more completely, because he kept showing up. Lily got a second granola bar drawer when the first one proved insufficient. She lobbied for a plant, was granted a small succulent, named it Gerald, and took the responsibility with great seriousness. In December, on the last working day before the holiday break, Daniel left the office with Lily at 4:30. In the parking garage, waiting for the elevator, Lily looked up at him with the wide-set eyes she'd gotten from her mother. "Duh," she said. "Are you happy?" He thought about it, not quickly, because she'd asked it as a real question and it deserved a real answer. "Yeah," he said. "I am. Because of the job? Because of a lot of things." She considered this. "Me? You're the main one," he said. She seemed satisfied with this. She took his hand, and they waited for the elevator together. When the doors opened, they were level with the floor flush, calibrated, smooth. He noticed this. He always noticed. They got in and rode down, his daughter's hand in his, the building working, the way buildings work when someone is paying attention. Outside, it was beginning to snow, the first light snow of the season, quiet and unhurried, the kind that doesn't demand anything of you. He held the door. They walked out into it.